The crisp morning air of a quiet suburban street is about to be shattered by the shriek of swans. For Arthur and Eleanor Washington, a retired couple in their 70s this day, begins like any other, with coffee tending their prize-winning roses and awaiting a special delivery. But that package sitting innocently on the wrong porch will become the catalyst for an accusation so vile it threatens to destroy their peaceful world. Two police officers, their hearts hardened by prejudice, will descend upon this gentle home, ready to enforce a cruel and baseless lie. They believe they hold all the power. They are wrong. They have no idea that a storm is coming for them, a storm wearing the dress uniform of the United States Marine Corps. The sun cast a warm golden glow over the manicured lawns of Sycamore Lane. It was the kind of street where neighbors still waved to each other, and the loudest sound on a Tuesday morning was usually the distant hum of a lawnmower. In the heart of this suburban tranquility lived Arthur and Eleanor Washington. Their home, a modest but immaculately kept brick ranch, was their sanctuary. Arthur, a retired postal worker of 35 years, knew every crack in the neighborhood's sidewalks. Eleanor, a former elementary school teacher, was the heart of their home. Her presence as warm and comforting as the scent of the cinnamon rolls she often baked. Their pride and joy, besides their only son, was their garden. Roses in a defiant riot of reds, pinks, and yellows climbed the trellis by the porch. Arthur was out there now, just after 8 a.m., carefully pruning a stray branch from his prized Mr. Lincoln rosebush. He was a tall man, still strong in his 70s, though a slight stoop had begun to betray his age. His hands, gnarled from decades of sorting mail and tending his garden, were gentle as they worked. "Arthur, coffee's ready." Eleanor's voice called from the screen door. "And don't you tire yourself out before breakfast." He smiled, clipping one last perfect crimson rose. "Just bringing in a beauty for my beauty," he called back, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. He walked up the porch steps, placing the rose in the small crystal vase Eleanor kept on the windowsill just for that purpose. It was a ritual as old as their retirement. As he settled into his chair at the kitchen table, Eleanor placed a steaming mug in front of him. "Any sign of the delivery truck yet?" she asked, her eyes bright with anticipation. "Not yet, Elle. But it's early." He took a slow sip of his coffee. "You're as giddy as a schoolgirl." "And why shouldn't I be?" she beamed. "It's not every day our son sends us a brand new smart television. Said he wants to be able to video call us on the big screen. Wants to see his old folks properly." Their son, Sergeant Jackson Washington, was the centerpiece of their world, a career Marine. He was everything they had raised him to be: disciplined, honorable, and fiercely loyal. His picture, stern and proud in his dress blues, sat on the mantelpiece, a silent guardian of the home. It was as Eleanor was pouring herself a second cup that she glanced out the window and frowned. "Arthur, look over there. At the Finch house." Arthur leaned forward, following her gaze. Across the street lived Brenda Finch, a recent arrival to the neighborhood. She had moved in about 6 months ago, a pale, nervous woman who kept mostly to herself, offering only tight, fleeting smiles in place of the friendly waves common on Sycamore Lane. On her porch, plain as day, sat a large brown cardboard box. "Well, I'll be," Arthur said, squinting. "That looks like the right size box." "Could it be ours?" Eleanor wondered aloud. "The delivery drivers are usually so careful here." "New driver, maybe," Arthur mused. He stood up and went to the front door, opening it to get a better look. He could just make out the shipping label. "Hang on." He disappeared into the living room and returned with a pair of binoculars, a remnant from his bird-watching phase. He focused them on the box across the street. Yep, that's it. Washington 112. Sycamore Lane. He confirmed, lowering the binoculars. Their address was 112. Brenda Finch lived at 115. Driver must have been dyslexic this morning. Eleanor sighed. Oh dear. Should we call the company? Arthur shook his head. It'll take them all day to sort it out. Brenda isn't home, her car is gone. We don't want it just sitting there for porch pirates. I'll just pop over and grab it. It's got our name right on it. It seemed the most logical neighborly thing to do. He slipped on his comfortable walking shoes, ambled down his driveway, and crossed the quiet street. The box was heavy but manageable. As he lifted it, he grunted with the effort. It was definitely a television. He turned, taking careful steps back across the asphalt towards his own home. Eleanor held the screen door open for him, a worried look on her face. You sure we should have done that, Arthur? She asked as he set the large box down in their foyer. What if she comes back and thinks we stole it? Eleanor. Darling, our name and address are plastered all over this thing? He chuckled, tapping the shipping label. We're not stealing, we're securing our property. We'll give her a call when she gets home, explain the mix-up. Maybe even offer her some of your cinnamon rolls for the trouble. They thought nothing more of it. They were honest people who had done a simple, honest thing. They had no way of knowing that from a second-story window, 2 houses down, another neighbor had been watching. And they had no way of knowing that Brenda Finch hadn't gone to work. She'd woken with a migraine and after taking her medication had fallen back asleep in her upstairs bedroom. She was awoken not by a phone call, but by the insistent shrill peal of her doorbell, followed by a hard official rap on the door. Groggy and confused, she stumbled downstairs to find 2 police officers on her porch. Ma'am, are you Brenda Finch? The older, heavier officer asked. His name tag read Rizzo. His face was a road map of cynical lines. Yes. What's wrong? We received a call about a package theft at this address. A neighbor reported seeing a man take a large box from your porch just a little while ago. We need to know what was in that package. Brenda's migraine-addled brain struggled to catch up. A package. She wasn't expecting anything. Then her eyes darted to the empty space on her porch, where deliveries were usually left. A neighbor saw someone. A man. Her mind, clouded by pain and prejudice, leaped to a conclusion. Oh God. She stammered, her voice rising in panic. My ex. He said he was sending my jewelry. My mother's pearls, a diamond tennis bracelet. He sent it here, so I'd get it safely. Someone stole it. Officer Rizzo's eyes narrowed. He exchanged a look with his younger partner, Officer Peterson. And who, ma'am, did the neighbor describe? Brenda. Wrung her hands, her gaze flicking across the street to the Washingtons' house. I don't know for sure, but the people across the street, the Washingtons, he's always out there just watching. It was a lie born of fear and a deep-seated irrational suspicion she held for her black neighbors. In her mind, they didn't fit the picture of Sycamore Lane. The lie, however, was all Officer Rizzo needed. It fit perfectly with his own worldview. Don't you worry, Ms. Finch, Rizzo said, his voice taking on a dangerously reassuring tone. We'll get your property back. He turned a grim smile touching his lips. He and Peterson strode off the porch, their destination, clear 112 Sycamore Lane. For Arthur and Eleanor Washington, the peaceful morning was over. Arthur was just finishing the last of his coffee when the heavy, authoritative knock rattled their front door. It wasn't the friendly rap of a neighbor. It was a summons. Eleanor, wiping her hands on her apron, went to answer it, expecting perhaps a courier with another package. When she opened the door, her welcoming smile froze on her face. 2 uniformed police officers filled the doorway, their expressions hard and unyielding. The older one, Officer Rizzo, stood with his hand resting casually on the butt of his holstered firearm. "Eleanor Washington," Rizzo asked, his voice flat. "Yes," she replied, a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. "Is everything all right, officers? We're investigating a felony theft, ma'am," Rizzo said, his eyes scanning past her into the neat and tidy home. "A theft that occurred across the street. We have a witness who saw your husband, Arthur Washington, take a large package from the porch of 115 Sycamore Lane." Eleanor's heart leaped into her throat. "Oh, goodness, no, you don't understand. That was our package. It was delivered to the wrong address by mistake." Arthur, hearing the commotion, had gotten up from the table. He appeared behind Eleanor, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Officers, there's been a misunderstanding," he said calmly. "The box had our name and address on it. We were just bringing it inside for safekeeping." Rizzo's lips curled into a smirk. It was a look that dismissed their explanation before it was even fully voiced. "That's a convenient story, but Ms. Finch, the owner of the house, says the package contained several $1,000s worth of jewelry." Arthur and Eleanor exchanged a look of pure shock. "Jewelry?" Arthur exclaimed. "That's impossible. It's a television our son sent us. The box is right here." He gestured toward the foyer where the large box sat. "Look at the shipping label. It says Washington. This is our home. We'll be the judge of that," Rizzo said, stepping past Eleanor and into the house. Peterson followed, his expression more uncertain, but his movements compliant with his senior partner. "Officer, you can't just come into our home," Eleanor said, her voice trembling but firm. "You don't have a warrant." Rizzo turned on her, his voice dropping to a low, intimidating growl. "Ma'am, we are in hot pursuit of stolen property. That gives us all the authority we need. Now you two are going to stay right here while we verify your little story." His use of the phrase, "you two," was laden with a dismissive, generalizing tone that made Eleanor's skin crawl. Peterson, the younger officer, looked uneasy. He kept glancing from his partner to the elderly couple. This was escalating far beyond a simple mix-up. Rizzo strode over to the box and tore at the tape, ripping the top open with a theatrical flourish. Inside, nestled in styrofoam, was a brand-new 65-inch television. Not jewelry. For a moment, silence hung in the air. Peterson let out a relieved breath. Frankie began. "It's a TV." They were telling the truth. Rizzo's face, however, darkened with anger. He hadn't found what he wanted, and being proven wrong in front of his subordinate was a blow to his ego. He wasn't ready to concede. His eyes swept the living room, hunting for anything he could use. They landed on the mantelpiece. Next to the photo of their son in his Marine uniform was a beautiful high-end digital camera. It was another gift from Jackson, a man who spoiled his parents at every opportunity. "What's this?" Rizzo said, walking over and picking up the camera. "Pretty fancy piece of equipment for a retired mailman." He turned it over in his hands, his expression accusatory. "Where'd you get this? Our son gave us that for our anniversary," Arthur said, his voice rising in indignation. His calmness was beginning to fray. The stress was making his chest feel tight. "Officers, this has gone far enough. You have seen the package. You have seen it's ours. This is harassment." "Harassment," Rizzo sneered. "I call it thorough police work. People like you always have a story, don't you? A son for every occasion, a gift for every stolen item. The thinly veiled racism in his "people like you" comment hung in the air like poison. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "How dare you?" The tightness in Arthur's chest intensified. A sharp pain radiated down his left arm. He stumbled back a step, grabbing his chest. He wheezed, his face turning ashen. Arthur Eleanor cried, rushing to his side. His heart. "He has a condition. You're doing this to him." She shot a terrified, pleading look at Officer Peterson. "Please, he needs to sit down. He needs his medication." Peterson looked genuinely alarmed now. "Frank, the man's having a medical issue. We should call an ambulance." But Rizzo was blinded by his rage and prejudice. He saw Arthur's distress not as a medical emergency, but as a tactic, a trick. "Oh, he's putting on a good show." Rizzo spat. His face twisted in contempt. "He's fine. He's just trying to get out of this." He turned his back on Arthur and pointed a finger at the television. "This doesn't prove anything. For all I know, you stole this too. You saw the box, knew something valuable was in it, and cooked up this story about the label. You probably steamed it off another box." The accusation was so ludicrous, so far-fetched, that it was clear Rizzo was no longer operating on logic. He was operating on pure malice. "That's enough," he declared, pulling out his handcuffs. "Arthur Washington, you're under arrest for grand larceny." "No," Eleanor screamed, trying to position herself between Rizzo and her husband. Peterson stepped forward, looking panicked. "Frank, hold on. We can't do this. We don't have probable cause. The evidence contradicts the claim." "I'll create the cause," Rizzo snarled back, shoving Peterson aside. He grabbed Arthur's arm. Arthur, weak and disoriented from the pain in his chest, could barely resist. "Please," Arthur gasped. "Don't do this. You should have thought of that before you went shopping on your neighbor's porch." Rizzo sneered, clicking the first cuff around Arthur's trembling wrist. The sound of the metal ratchet was like a gunshot in the quiet house. Eleanor let out a sob of despair. The world seemed to be collapsing around them. They were helpless, trapped in a nightmare woven from a neighbor's lie and an officer's hate. It was in that moment of absolute hopelessness, with the cold steel tight on Arthur's wrist, that a new sound cut through the tension. It was the deep, powerful rumble of a large truck engine pulling into their driveway. The sound of the engine was followed by the solid, reassuring thud of a truck door closing. Heavy footsteps crunched on the gravel of the driveway, then fell with rhythmic certainty onto the concrete path leading to the front door. The screen door, which was still ajar, was pushed open fully. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright morning sun, was a figure that commanded immediate and absolute attention. He was a tall, powerfully built man in his late 20s. But it wasn't just his size that seized the room. It was his uniform. He was immaculate in the United States Marine Corps Service A uniform. The forest green coat was perfectly tailored, adorned with a chest full of ribbons, sharp shooting badges, and the golden eagle globe and anchor emblem on his collar. The khaki shirt and tie were crisp, the white barracks cover on his head, pristine. He held it in the crook of his arm as he stepped inside. This was Sergeant Jackson Washington. He had been on his way to a recruitment event at a local high school, and had decided to stop by to surprise his parents and help them set up the new television. His eyes, sharp and analytical, took in the entire scene in a fraction of a second. He saw Officer Rizzo hand on his father's cuffed wrist. He saw his father pale and clutching his chest. He saw his mother, her face streaked with tears. He saw Officer Peterson looking terrified and lost. He saw the ripped-open box in the foyer. He didn't shout. He didn't rush forward. His voice, when it came, was unnaturally calm, yet it sliced through the tension like a razor. "Drop your hand from my father. Now." It wasn't a request. It was an order delivered with the kind of authority that expected nothing less than instant compliance. Officer Rizzo, startled instinctively, let go of Arthur's arm. He turned to face the source of the command, his bluster momentarily deflating as he took in the uniform. Cops, even crooked ones, generally held a default respect, or at least a cautious apprehension for the military. "Who the hell are you?" Rizzo demanded, trying to recover his bravado. Jackson took one more step into the room, his polished black shoes making almost no sound on the hardwood floor. "I am Sergeant Jackson, Washington, United States Marine Corps. These are my parents, Eleanor and Arthur Washington, and this is their home into which you have apparently entered without invitation. I will ask you one time, what is going on here?" His gaze was intense, unblinking. It was the look of a man trained to assess threats and neutralize them with maximum efficiency. Officer Peterson visibly swallowed, taking a half step back. Rizzo, however, bristled at the challenge to his authority. "This is a police investigation, Sergeant. It doesn't concern you. We're arresting this man for theft." Jackson's eyes flicked to the handcuffs, still dangling from his father's wrist, then back to Rizzo. A flicker of something cold and dangerous passed through his expression, but his voice remained steady. "Theft of what?" "Officer, a package containing thousands of dollars in jewelry," Rizzo said, puffing out his chest. Jackson's gaze drifted to the open box in the foyer. He saw the brand name on the styrofoam. He looked back at Rizzo. "Theft of a television. You mean the one I purchased for them and had shipped here, the one that was mistakenly delivered across the street to 115 Sycamore Lane, which I can see from the shipping label that is still attached to the box?" Every statement was a precise, factual strike. Rizzo's face began to flush. He had no answer. "We have a complainant who stated the box contained jewelry," Rizzo blustered. "You have a complainant who lied," Jackson countered calmly. "A lie you seem to have accepted without performing even the most basic due diligence. For instance, did you ask the complainant for a tracking number, a receipt, a shipping confirmation for this alleged jewelry?" Silence. Rizzo's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Jackson then turned his attention to the younger officer. "You, Officer Peterson, what is your partner's name and badge number?" Peterson, startled at being addressed directly, stammered, "Officer Frank Rizzo, badge number 743, and your own, Officer Kyle Peterson, 912. "Thank you, Officer Peterson," Jackson said, his tone conveying that this small act of compliance had been noted. He then pulled his state-of-the-art smartphone from his pocket. He tapped the screen. "For the record, it is now 9:17 a.m. on Tuesday, July 18th. I am recording this interaction. Officers Rizzo and Peterson, you are being recorded. You are in my parents' home. My father, a 72-year-old man with a documented heart condition, is in medical distress due to your actions, and one of you has placed him in restraints. Officer Rizzo, I am ordering you for the second and final time to remove the handcuffs from my father." The shift in power was palpable. It was no longer two cops harassing an elderly couple. It was two patrol officers being held accountable by a man who radiated more command presence than their own chief. The uniform, The precise language, the calm demeanor. It was a combination that completely dismantled Rizzo's aggressive tactics. Rizzo looked from the imposing Marine to his partner, who was now staring at the floor, wanting to be anywhere else. He looked at Arthur, who was leaning heavily on Eleanor, his breathing still ragged. The fight was gone from Rizzo's eyes, replaced by a dawning, panicked realization that he had crossed a line from which there might be no easy return. With trembling, angry fingers, he fumbled for the handcuff key. He unlocked the single cuff from Arthur's wrist. The metal clinked as it fell away. Jackson nodded slowly. Good. Now you two are going to sit on that couch, and you are not going to move or speak until a supervisor arrives. I trust one of you has a radio to call for one. Or would you like me to make the call for you? He wasn't asking. He was telling them what was going to happen next. The hunter had just become the prey. Sergeant Jackson Washington moved with the fluid economy of a man for whom crisis was a familiar environment. While Rizzo and Peterson sat stiffly on the floral print sofa looking like scolded schoolboys, Jackson's first priority was his father. Dad's pills. The small bottle under the sink. He said, his voice instantly softening as he turned to his parents. He guided Arthur to his favorite armchair, loosening his collar. Just breathe deep and slow, Dad. Just like we practiced. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Eleanor hurried back from the kitchen, her hands shaking as she gave Jackson the small vial of nitroglycerin tablets. He expertly placed one under his father's tongue. Just let it dissolve, Dad. You're okay. I'm here now. It's over. He knelt by his father's chair, one hand on his shoulder, until Arthur's breathing began to even out, and some color returned to his face. Only then did he stand and turn his attention back to the two officers. The cold, authoritative mask slipped back into place. Officer Peterson Jackson began, his tone surgical. Did you or Officer Rizzo witness my father committing any crime? Peterson flinched. He looked at Rizzo, who shot him a venomous glare, a silent command to stay quiet. Peterson dropped his eyes and mumbled, No, Sergeant. We were responding to a witness report. A single witness, Jackson pressed. A witness whose claim, as we have all seen, was immediately and verifiably false. The moment you opened that box. Peterson remained silent, his misery palpable. Jackson continued his methodical deconstruction. Officer Rizzo. When you entered this home, did you have a warrant? Rizzo, his face a thundercloud of resentment, finally spoke. I told you it was hot pursuit. Hot pursuit is a legal doctrine allowing police to chase a fleeing suspect into a private residence. Jackson cut him off, his voice sharp as broken glass. My 72-year-old father, who you found inside his own home, was not fleeing from anything. So I ask you again, did you have a warrant, or did you have consent to enter and search this property? Rizzo's jaw clenched. The door was open. The door was opened by my mother to answer your knock, Jackson corrected him. An open door is not an open invitation for a warrantless search, especially a search that extended to handling and inspecting private property, like that camera. He pointed to the mantelpiece, which, by the way, I also purchased for them. I have the receipt in my email, time-stamped and dated. Would you like to see it? Rizzo slumped back into the couch cushions, defeated. He had no legal ground left to stand on, and he knew it. Every procedural corner he had cut, every assumption he had made based on prejudice was now being laid bare under the unblinking eye of a man who lived and breathed rules and regulations. Now let's address the initial complaint, Jackson said, pacing slowly in front of the sofa. It was a controlled, intimidating movement. "The complainant, a Miss Brenda Finch, I believe you said. She claimed a box of jewelry was stolen. You found a television. At this point, a reasonable officer would conclude the complainant was mistaken or perhaps lying. But you didn't do that, did you?" "Officer Rizzo." You doubled down. "You accused my parents of a separate theft of a camera. You threatened them. You physically assaulted my father by unlawfully restraining him, triggering a medical emergency." "Why?" He stopped directly in front of Rizzo, forcing the officer to look up at him. "Why was it so important for you to make them criminals? What was it about this retired postal worker and this retired school teacher that made you so certain they were guilty?" The question hung in the air, thick with unspoken accusation. The real reason, ugly, indefensible prejudice, was a thing no one would admit to, but everyone in the room now understood. Jackson didn't wait for an answer. He knew wouldn't come. He turned to Peterson. "Officer Peterson, I assume your patrol car is equipped with a dash cam and that you are both wearing body cameras, as is standard procedure for your department." Peterson nodded numbly. "And were those devices active during your entire interaction with my parents, starting from the moment you stepped onto this property?" Peterson's eyes widened slightly. He glanced at Rizzo. It was a fleeting, panicked look, but Jackson caught it. "I see," Jackson said softly. "So there may be some technical difficulties with the recordings." "Convenient." He pulled out his phone again. This time he didn't hit record. He dialed a number from his contacts. He put the phone on speaker. A crisp, professional voice answered on the second ring. "Chief Dalton's office. This is Sergeant Clark." The color drained from Rizzo's and Peterson's faces. He wasn't calling the local precinct watch commander. He had called the office of the Chief of Police directly. "Sergeant Clark, this is Sergeant Jackson Washington of the United States Marine Corps." Jackson said, his voice formal and clear. "I apologize for bypassing the chain of command, but I am at the scene of a time-sensitive and serious incident involving 2 of your officers. I need to speak with Chief Dalton or his highest-ranking deputy immediately." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Sergeant Washington, The chief is in a meeting. Can I ask the nature of the incident?" "The nature of the incident," Jackson said, his eyes locked on Rizzo, "is an apparent case of illegal entry, warrantless search, attempted false arrest and assault of an elderly citizen by officers. Frank Rizzo badge 743 and Kyle Peterson badge 912. I am on site at 112 Sycamore Lane. I am requesting immediate supervisory presence and an internal affairs investigator. I have the entire confession and situation under control pending their arrival. And please advise the chief that the victim of the assault is my father." There was another longer pause. Then Sergeant Clark's voice came back, all business. "I'm patching you through to the chief's personal line right now, Sergeant. Please hold." Rizzo stared at Jackson with a look of pure hatred, the fury of a petty tyrant who had been utterly and completely outmaneuvered. Peterson just looked sick. He knew their careers were in all likelihood over. The Marine hadn't just turned the tables, he had flipped the whole damn house over. The sound of Chief Dalton's voice coming onto the line was the sound of judgment arriving. Less than 15 minutes later, Sycamore Lane was no longer quiet. It was flooded with the silent, flashing red and blue lights of 3 additional patrol cars and a black, unmarked sedan. Chief of Police Michael Dalton, a man with a stern reputation and a face that showed he'd seen it all, stepped out of the sedan himself. This was not an incident, he was delegating. He entered the Washingtons' home to a scene of surreal stillness. Arthur was now sipping water, looking shaken but stable. Eleanor stood beside him, her hand protectively on his shoulder. Rizzo and Peterson were still on the couch, monuments of disgrace, and Sergeant Jackson Washington stood at parade rest in the center of the room, the undisputed commander of the situation. Sergeant Washington Chief Dalton asked, his eyes sweeping the room, his expression grim. Chief Dalton Jackson acknowledged with a slight nod. "Thank you for your prompt response." The next hour was a blur of methodical official procedure, but the tone was set from the moment Chief Dalton entered. He spoke briefly and quietly with Jackson, then turned to Arthur and Eleanor, his voice filled with a sincere apology. "Mr. and Mrs. Washington, on behalf of the entire Northwood Police Department, I am profoundly sorry for what you have just endured. There is no excuse for this." He then faced his officers. His voice dropped, becoming hard as granite. "Rizzo, Peterson, on your feet. You're on administrative leave, effective immediately. Hand over your badges and service weapons, now." The public humiliation was profound. As a supervising sergeant took their gear, Dalton turned back to Jackson. "You mentioned body cameras." Jackson's eyes flickered toward Peterson. "I believe there may have been a malfunction." "Chief." Dalton's jaw tightened. "I see. Well, we'll pull the footage. Malfunctioning or not, the data card will tell a story. We will also be canvassing the neighborhood for any security camera footage and taking a full formal statement from Ms. Brenda Finch." The karma began to cascade. Brenda Finch, when confronted by two stern-faced detectives and the chief of police, completely fell apart. Her lie about the jewelry evaporated under the first hint of legal pressure. She admitted she had panicked and made it up. A neighbor 2 doors down, an avid tech enthusiast, came forward with high-definition security footage from 4 different angles. The footage clearly showed Arthur crossing the street, picking up a box with his name clearly visible to the camera, and carrying it directly into his own home. It also captured the arrival of Rizzo and Peterson, their aggressive posture, and their entry into the house. The most damning evidence, however, came from Officer Peterson. Faced with an internal affairs investigation and the very real prospect of criminal charges for perjury and filing a false report, he broke. With a lawyer present, he gave a full confession. He detailed Officer Rizzo's long-standing pattern of discriminatory behavior and racist remarks. He admitted that Rizzo had ordered him to turn his body camera off just before they knocked on the Washingtons' door, claiming it would be a waste of battery. Rizzo's own camera, it was discovered, had also been conveniently deactivated. It was the nail in Rizzo's coffin. Frank Rizzo was fired. The termination was swift and public. But it didn't end there. Based on Peterson's testimony and the flagrant violation of rights, the district attorney's office brought criminal charges against him: official oppression, filing a false report, and misdemeanor assault. His pension was gone. His career was a ruin. His name became a local synonym for police misconduct. Kyle Peterson was also fired, but in exchange for his testimony, he was granted immunity from prosecution. His law enforcement career was over before it had barely begun a permanent stain on his record for his complicity. But Jackson and his family weren't finished. Justice was more than just seeing the guilty punished. It was about ensuring this couldn't be easily swept under the rug and forgotten. They hired a sharp civil rights attorney named Jessica Alvarez, a woman known for holding police departments accountable. She filed a formidable federal lawsuit against the city of Northwood and its police department, citing a pattern of negligence in supervising officers like Rizzo, who it turned out had a history of complaints against him that were never seriously investigated. The lawsuit detailed the illegal search, the attempted false arrest, the emotional distress, and the clear-as-day racial profiling. The city's lawyers took one look at the evidence, the neighbor's crystal-clear video, Peterson's confession, Jackson's recording, and the towering credibility of a Marine sergeant, and knew they didn't have a prayer in court. They settled. The amount was substantial, a figure in the high six figures. It was a public admission of catastrophic failure. As part of the settlement, the Northwood Police Department was forced to implement a sweeping new training program, co-designed by a civil liberties union, focusing on de-escalation implicit bias and the legalities of search and seizure. The program was named the Washington Accord in the settlement documents. Brenda Finch was charged with filing a false police report. She pleaded guilty, receiving a hefty fine and mandatory community service. But her real punishment was the ostracism. She became a pariah on Sycamore Lane. No one waved. No one smiled. The quiet shunning was so complete that within 3 months, a for sale sign was hammered into her lawn. The storm that Sergeant Jackson Washington had brought to his parents' doorstep had not just saved them. It had cleansed the street and forced a reckoning that would echo for years to come. 6 months later, the first chill of a true New England autumn was beginning to settle over Northwood. The fiery reds and defiant yellows of the maple trees on Sycamore Lane painted a scene of tranquil beauty, a stark contrast to the ugly turmoil that had gripped the street that one summer morning. For the world, it was just a changing of the seasons. For the Washington family, it represented a profound and hard-won transformation. The chapter of their ordeal concluded not in their quiet home, but in the sterile, glass-walled conference room of their lawyer, Jessica Alvarez. The downtown office overlooked the city park, and the afternoon sun streamed in, illuminating the fine layer of dust on a stack of legal files. At the head of the polished mahogany table, Jessica, a woman whose sharp suits were matched only by her sharper intellect, slid a final document toward Arthur. "This is the last page, Arthur," she said, her voice warm, but businesslike. "Your signature here officially establishes the Sycamore Lane Scholarship Fund as a non-profit entity. The city's settlement payment was wired to the trust account this morning. It's done." Arthur picked up the heavy pen. His hand, which had trembled so violently while cuffed months ago, was now perfectly steady. He looked at Eleanor, who gave him a reassuring nod. He looked at Jackson, who sat beside him, a bastion of quiet pride. With a firm, deliberate stroke, he signed his name. "It feels strange," Eleanor confessed, looking around the room. "To have it all reduced to papers and signatures. So much pain, so much fear, all ending with a pen stroke." "That pen stroke is power," Eleanor Jessica said, leaning forward. "Don't ever diminish it. That signature doesn't just represent money. It represents accountability. The Washington Accord, as it's officially being called in the city charter, is now mandatory. Every single officer in the Northwood PD, from the chief down to the rawest rookie, has to complete the 40-hour training course on de-escalation and constitutional rights by the end of this fiscal year. Any new hire has to pass it before they're even issued a badge." And Rizzo Jackson asked, his voice low. He hadn't spoken much during the meeting, content to listen and observe. "Frank Rizzo's trial is set for January." Jessica reported, flipping open a different file. "The DA is confident. With Peterson's testimony, the neighbor's video and Rizzo's own history of complaints, which are now admissible to establish a pattern, he's facing jail time. He'll never wear a badge again. He tried to get his union to back him, but the evidence was so overwhelming, they dropped him. He's a pariah. "What about Officer Peterson?" Arthur asked quietly. He had often wondered about the young, conflicted officer who had been swept along in Rizzo's wake. "Kyle Peterson is a man without a country," Jessica stated bluntly. "He avoided criminal charges, but his law enforcement career is over. He testified that Rizzo essentially blackmailed him, threatening his probationary status if he didn't go along. It doesn't excuse his inaction, but it explains it. He's been dishonorably discharged. No police force in this state, or likely any other, will hire him. He's a ghost in the system he once swore to uphold." A heavy silence settled over the table. It wasn't a celebratory moment. It was somber. The destruction of two men's lives, even two who had caused them such harm, was not something the Washingtons took pleasure in. "This scholarship," Eleanor said, her hands clasped tightly on the table. "We want the first recipients to be chosen by the spring. We want this money born from such ugliness to create something beautiful, a chance for a young person who might otherwise not have one." "It's the best kind of justice," Jessica agreed, smiling for the first time. "It's not just punitive, it's generative. It builds something new." Leaving the lawyer's office, the crisp autumn air felt clean fresh. They had faced the system, and with their son as their shield and champion, they had forced it to bend toward justice. But the legal victory was only one part of the reckoning. The human cost was something they would confront in a far less formal setting. A week later, Eleanor needed a specific brand of molasses for her gingerbread recipe, a sure sign that the holidays were approaching. Arthur drove them to the large supermarket on the other side of town, the one they rarely frequented. As Eleanor navigated the baking aisle, Arthur pushed the cart, enjoying the simple domesticity of the errand. It was as he turned the corner into the canned goods aisle that he saw him. He was thinner, his face pale and drawn. The crisp police uniform was replaced by a red smock slightly too large for his frame, with the store's logo stitched on the breast. He was stocking cans of green beans, his movements listless and mechanical. It was Kyle Peterson. Arthur stopped the cart. His heart didn't race with anger or fear, but with a complex mix of pity and sorrow. Peterson hadn't noticed him yet. He looked hollowed out, the nervous energy he had displayed in their living room, replaced by a vacant exhaustion. He was just a young man, stocking shelves, his future obliterated by one morning of moral cowardice. As if sensing he was being watched, Peterson looked up. His eyes met Arthur's. For a split second, recognition flashed, followed by a wave of pure, undiluted panic. He dropped the can of green beans he was holding. It clattered loudly on the linoleum floor, rolling to a stop near the wheel of Arthur's cart. Peterson froze, his face ashen. He looked as if he wanted to bolt, to disappear into the shelves themselves. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His eyes were wide with shame. Eleanor, drawn by the noise, came around the corner. She saw her husband, then saw the young man in the red smock, and she understood instantly. Her hand went to Arthur's arm. Arthur took a slow breath. He could have stared him down. He could have turned and walked away, leaving the young man to his shame. But Arthur Washington was a man of quiet grace. He bent down slowly, his old joints protesting slightly, and picked up the can of green beans. He walked the few steps to Peterson and held it out. "You dropped this, son." "Arthur," said his voice, gentle, devoid of any malice. Peterson stared at the can as if it were a venomous snake. His hands trembled as he took it. His eyes were filled with tears. "Mr. Washington, I am so sorry," he whispered the words, barely audible. "For everything." I am so sorry. I know you are, Eleanor said, softly from behind Arthur. We hope you find your way. They didn't wait for a response. Eleanor gently guided Arthur, and they continued with their shopping, leaving Kyle Peterson standing in the middle of the aisle, weeping silently among the canned vegetables, a man fully and finally confronted by the ghost of the officer he failed to be. The final piece of their public journey came in late November. The Northwood High School auditorium was filled to capacity for its annual Community Spirit Assembly. This year, however, was special. The main event was the official inauguration of the Sycamore Lane Scholarship Fund. The Washingtons, who had never sought the spotlight, found themselves sitting in the front row, with Jackson once again home on leave, seated between them. To their surprise and initial discomfort, Chief of Police Michael Dalton was also in the front row a few seats down. He had asked to be there. The principal gave a glowing introduction, speaking of community members who turned adversity into opportunity. Then he invited Arthur and Eleanor to the podium. Eleanor, the retired teacher, felt a flicker of her old classroom command return. She spoke first, her voice clear and steady. My husband and I are not public speakers. She began, a small smile on her face. We are gardeners. We believe that with care, patience, and good soil, beautiful things can grow even in the most unlikely of places. This fund is our attempt to provide some good soil for the young people of this community, who are our most precious flowers. Then it was Arthur's turn. He looked out at the sea of faces young and old. He didn't speak of hate or prejudice. He spoke of its opposite. A community is like a body. He said, his voice resonating with simple sincerity. When one part is hurt, the whole body feels it. And when one part is healed, the whole body becomes stronger. We were hurt, but our community, our neighbors, our friends, you helped us heal. This scholarship is our way of giving that strength back. It's our way of saying thank you. When they finished, the auditorium rose to its feet in a thunderous, sustained ovation. It wasn't just for the scholarship, it was for them. It was a public embrace from the town they called home. Then Chief Dalton was invited to say a few words. He walked to the podium, his face etched with humility. I'm not here today to talk about policing, he began, his voice solemn. I'm here to talk about listening. For too long, some of us weren't listening. The Washington family, through their courage and their grace, forced us to listen. They reminded us that our duty is not to rule, but to serve. The Washington Accord is not just a training manual. It's a promise to this community that we will be better, that we will listen, and that we will never, ever forget the lesson taught to us by the quiet dignity of two gardeners and their son, the Marine. His public act of contrition was stunning. It was a formal institutional apology delivered not in a press conference, but in the heart of the community itself. Later that day, back in their own sanctuary, the peace felt earned. The three of them sat on the back porch, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill, sipping the hot cider Eleanor had warmed on the stove. The garden was mostly dormant, resting for the winter, but it looked beautiful in its slumber. He looked so broken, Arthur said quietly, finally speaking of the encounter in the supermarket. That young man, Peterson. Some men are broken by their own choices, Dad Jackson said. He chose to stand by and watch. That's a heavy weight to carry. I can't find it in my heart to hate him, Eleanor confessed. I just feel sad for him, and for Rizzo too. So much anger in that man. It must be like carrying a bag of rocks around your whole life. Arthur looked out at his yard, at the neat pile of leaves he'd raked earlier. For a while there, after that day, I was afraid of this place, afraid in my own home. I thought the peace was gone for good. I'd look at the front door and just see them standing there. He looked at his son, then his wife. But it's not gone. It's still here. Seeing the whole town in that auditorium. Seeing the chief eat that humble pie. Seeing that boy in the grocery store living with his choices. It's like it scrubbed the last of the fear away. This house feels like our own again. Jackson watched his parents, their hands intertwined. The cause teaches you a specific kind of courage. The courage to face fire, to run toward danger. But there's another kind of courage. The kind you two have. The courage to face down hate without becoming hateful yourselves. The courage to plant a garden where someone else tried to sow weeds. That's the hardest kind of courage there is, and it's the kind I'm proudest to be associated with. He put his arms around his mother and father, pulling them into a three-way hug. The sun was setting, casting a final golden glow over the quiet street. The reckoning was over. The hard karma had been delivered not just as punishment, but as a catalyst for restoration. And in the Washington's garden, a profound and resilient peace had finally taken root. The story of Arthur Eleanor and Sergeant Jackson Washington is a powerful reminder that heroes don't always carry weapons into battle. Sometimes they carry the truth. Their ordeal highlights the terrifying reality of prejudice in power, but it also shines a bright light on the incredible strength of family honor and standing firm for what is right. In a world where injustice can appear so suddenly, their story proves that one person acting with courage and integrity can change everything. It wasn't just about a Marine saving his parents. It was about the unyielding power of dignity in the face of hatred. If this story moved you and you believe in the power of truth and justice, please take a moment to hit the like button and share this video with others. Your support helps us bring more impactful stories like this to light. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Thank you for watching.